Welcome to the deep dive. I
Right.
mean, imagine you are building a fortress, right?
Right.
You pour millions into the thickest stone walls, you install these heavy iron gates, and you hire an elite guard force to just stand watch on the parapets.
Yeah, you feel completely untouchable.
Exactly. You feel totally secure. But, you don't realize that the threat isn't actually coming over the wall because 3 miles away, someone quietly slipped a microscopic toxin into the municipal water supply, and that water is currently pumping right out of the tap in your fortress kitchen.
That is, unfortunately, the perfect analogy for where we are right now.
Yeah. And today we are looking at a massive stack of cybersecurity intelligence from the first quarter of 2026. And the data shows us that this exact scenario has basically become the dominant reality for enterprise networks.
It really has.
We are tracking a monumental shift here. I mean, we are moving away from the era of the lone wolf hacker trying to brute force a password to break through a firewall.
Sure.
We have fully entered the era of, well, industrialized supply chain poisoning.
And the intelligence we've synthesized today, which, by the way, spans reports from Palo Alto Networks Unit 42, Reversing Labs, Data Minier, Europol, and forensic teams globally, it paints a picture of an ecosystem that has just fully corporatized.
Yeah, corporatized is the word.
What's fascinating here is that the traditional network perimeter is dead. It simply doesn't exist in the way we've been taught to defend it for the last 2 decades.
Right, it's just gone.
Yeah. The new perimeter is the CI/CD pipeline. It's the continuous integration and deployment systems that developers use to build software. It's identity management, authentication tokens, and, the third-party vendors you blindly trust with administrative access to your environment.
And navigating this new reality requires an entirely different set of tools and honestly a completely different mindset. Which is why, before we get into the deep technical weeds of these campaigns, I really have to give a massive thank you to our sponsors, www.breached.company and www.cisomarketplace.com.
Absolutely essential partners in this space.
Right? As we're going to explore today, when the attack comes from inside your trusted supply chain or from a third-party vendor you rely on, having unparalleled visibility into your external risks and dark web exposure is literally the only way to survive.
Yeah, you can't defend against what you can't see.
Exactly. The work that www.breach.company and www.cisomarketplace.com do in mapping out these threat landscapes is just absolutely critical for modern security teams. And you are going to see exactly why that visibility is non-negotiable as we unpack this intelligence.
The necessity of that external visibility becomes, frankly, painfully obvious when we examine how the most sophisticated threat actors are operating right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this, because the telemetry from March 2026 is wild.
It's a masterclass in supply chain compromise. It was executed by a group tracked as TeamPCP. The threat intelligence community also refers to them as PCPCAT, or Shell Force.
Right.
And their operational tradecraft completely inverted the standard attack model. They didn't target a bank's financial databases or like a hospital's patient records directly.
No, they targeted the security tools.
Exactly. They targeted the very security tools that DevOps teams deploy to keep those organizations safe.
The audacity of it is just staggering to me. I was reviewing the Reversing Labs chronology, and the velocity of this campaign is what really stood out. I mean, on March 19th, TeamPCP hits Aqua Security's Trivy.
Trivy is ubiquitous.
It's everywhere. It's a vulnerability scanner used by countless engineering teams to look for weaknesses in container images and file systems. And TeamPCP got in not through some exotic zero-day exploit, but through a failure in credential hygiene.
Yeah. They leveraged an incomplete credential rotation.
Oh, man. Incomplete credential rotation.
That phrase is literally the bane of every cloud architect's existence.
It really is.
So, in modern cloud environments, you have service accounts, right?
Okay.
These are non-human identities used by applications to talk to other applications.
Like a robot talking to a robot.
Exactly. And an organization might decide to revoke and reissue the access keys for these accounts as a routine security measure, or maybe following a minor security incident. But modern infrastructure is so sprawling and complex that a key might be rotated in the primary identity provider, but a legacy system.
Or some forgotten script.
Right, a forgotten script tucked away in a dusty corner of the CI/CD pipeline. It still holds a valid, unrevoked token. And TeamPCP found one of these orphan tokens linked to the Aquabot service account.
So they compromise Aquabot, which is a highly trusted internal identity. And what do they do with it? They execute a force push to 76 different version tags of the Trivy GitHub actions simultaneously.
Which is devastating.
It is, because for anyone managing a build pipeline, pulling a specific version tag of a tool is supposed to guarantee immutability. You pull version 1.4, you expect the exact same code every single time.
Right, that's the whole point of version control.
Yeah. But TeamPCP shattered that assumption. They overwrote the underlying kind of 76 established versions. So anyone pulling those versions to scan their code for security flaws was inadvertently pulling down a malicious payload.
And the payload they deployed wasn't a standard ransomware executable. The intelligence categorizes it as a cloud stealer.
A cloud stealer.
Yeah, its primary function was to silently scrape the local environment for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform credentials. They weaponized a security scanner, which, inherently requires read access to the entire code base and the deployment environment to harvest the highest privileged keys available.
They turned the guard dog into a spy.
That's exactly what they did.
And the momentum didn't even stop there. 2 days later, on March 21st, they pivot. The forensic evidence suggests they used GitHub Personal Access Tokens, PATs, that they likely harvested during that initial Trivy blast radius.
Right, they just recycled the stolen access.
Yeah, and they used those stolen PATs to hit checkmarks. Specifically, they targeted checkmarks KICS, which is an infrastructure as code scanner. Again, another tool designed to analyze cloud deployment scripts for misconfigurations.
And the checkmarks compromise demonstrates a terrifying escalation in their evasion techniques.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't just dump a malicious binary into the repository. They subverted the official container entry point.
Wait, how did they do that?
They modified a file called setup.esh. So when a developer pulls the checkmarks container to run a scan, setup.esh is the script that initializes the environment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, TeamPCP injected a highly sophisticated three-stage payload directly into that initialization sequence.
The architecture of that payload is what completely rewired my understanding of persistence mechanisms.
That's brilliant.
It is. Stage 1 is pure reconnaissance, right? Just checking to make sure it's not being analyzed in a security sandbox. Stage 2 reaches out to their command and control server to pull down the core stealer logic. But stage 3 is the fallback mechanism. I was reading this part of the Unit 42 report, and it seriously reads like a spy novel.
The fallback mechanism is an architectural masterpiece of living off the land. Traditionally, if a security operations center detects malware communicating with a known bad external IP address, they update the egress firewall rules to block that traffic.
Hi, they just cut the cord.
Exactly. The command and control channel is severed, and the malware is effectively neutralized. But TeamPCP anticipated this.
This is the genius part. If that primary external C2 server fails or gets blocked, the malware doesn't crash. It doesn't go dormant. It reaches into the compromised environment, grabs the victim's own valid GitHub token, and uses it to authenticate back to the victim's own organizational GitHub account.
Right.
It then silently creates a brand new hidden repository right there inside the victim's environment, naming it docs-TPCP.
And it begins using that internal repository as a dead drop for the stolen cloud credentials. From the perspective of a network defender, this is a nightmare to detect.
Oh, absolutely.
You are looking for anomalous outbound connections to suspicious domains. You are not typically looking for an authenticated internal service account creating a repository with a perfectly plausible administrative name like docs-PPCP. It's camouflage at an institutional level.
It's like a bank robber realizing the police have surrounded the building and blocked the exits, so instead of trying to shoot their way out, they steal a manager's uniform, walk into the back office, open a brand new safe deposit box using the bank's own override keys, and just stash the stolen cash in the bank's own vault until the heat dies down.
Yeah.
They are weaponizing the victim's trusted infrastructure against them.
That metaphor perfectly encapsulates the threat model. And it highlights why relying solely on perimeter defenses is a failing strategy. When the attacker is operating with the authorization of your own internal identity providers, firewall rules are totally irrelevant.
Yeah, the firewall is useless at that point.
Exactly. This is where continuous monitoring of anomalous identity behavior becomes paramount.
So they compromised Trivy on the 19th. They compromised checkmarks on the 21st. And then on March 23rd, they execute the most devastating pivot of the entire campaign. They move from infrastructure security tools directly into the artificial intelligence supply chain.
Yeah, they target Berry AI's LightLM.
LightLM.
This is where the scale of the compromise moves from a severe incident to a systemic catastrophe.
Totally.
LightLM serves as a universal proxy. Developers use it to seamlessly translate API calls between different large language models, OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, you name it.
It's everywhere.
It's a foundational building block for any engineering team building AI-integrated applications. And the Reversing Labs report notes that this library sees approximately 95 million downloads per month.
95 million downloads. The blast radius is almost incomprehensible. And the mechanism they used to poison the PyPI registry, the Python package index, was incredibly devious. They compromised versions 1.82.7 and 1.82.8. But they didn't just hide malicious code deep inside some obscure function that a developer might never actually call.
Yeah, they didn't.
They embedded the payload inside a .pth file.
The use of a .pth file is a profound abuse of Python's initialization architecture.
Can you break that down? How does that work?
Sure. So when a Python environment starts up, before it even looks at the main application script a developer wrote, it parses .pth files to configure the environment's system path.
Well, it's like the very first thing that happened.
Exactly. It's a foundational setup step. By injecting their payload into a .pth file, TeamPCP guaranteed execution. A developer didn't even have to import the malicious LightLM module into their code.
Wow.
Merely having the poisoned package present in the environment meant that the moment the Python interpreter initialized, the malware ran.
It's the ultimate execution guarantee. You don't have to trick the user into clicking anything or running a specific command. Just turning the engine on triggers the bomb.
Yep.
And because LightLM is designed to handle API keys for various AI services, the environment variables in those developer workstations are an absolute goldmine of high-value credentials.
The cascading nature of this is what Jacob Krell from Reversing Labs highlighted as the chain reaction compromise.
The chain reaction.
Right. One single unmanaged dependency, that initial incomplete credential rotation on the Aquabot account, provided the leverage to compromise 5 major supply chain ecosystems in less than a month.
It's mind-blowing.
Threat actors target security tools and AI proxies precisely because these applications require the broadest access and the highest privileges by design. To scan an entire cloud environment, you need God-level read permissions.
Right?
If you compromise the scanner, you inherit the God-level permissions.
It fundamentally questions the bedrock of modern software development. I mean, you download a tool to secure your code, and the tool itself is the infection vector.
Yep.
And once TeamPCP secured this industrialized access to developer environments across the globe, the intelligence reports show us the next phase of their operation. Because sitting on a mountain of stolen AWS tokens doesn't actually generate revenue until you have a mechanism to monetize it.
Right. Monetization at this scale requires logistics, infrastructure, and a distribution network. It requires moving away from the old model of an initial access broker quietly selling network access on a dark web forum to a single buyer.
Yeah, the lone wolf is gone.
Exactly. What we are seeing now is the formal integration of access brokers with massive cybercrime cartels.
The Data Miner Intelligence Report lays this out in chilling detail. TeamPCP partnered with the Vect ransomware group and breach forums.
Vect is an established, highly mature extortion group.
Very mature.
They operate with custom-built tooling, TOR-only routing for their infrastructure to obscure their geographic location, and they mandate that all transactions occur in Monero.
The reliance on Monero is really interesting.
It's a key indicator of their operational maturity. Unlike Bitcoin, which operates on a public ledger where every transaction can theoretically be traced by blockchain analysis firms, Monero utilizes ring signatures and stealth addresses.
That's untraceable.
Completely.
Yeah.
It totally obfuscates the sender, the receiver, and the transaction amount. It provides cryptographic anonymity, which is essential for a group operating at Vect's financial volume.
So Vect has the ransomware payload, they have the secure payment infrastructure, and they want to scale. Instead of recruiting a few dozen affiliates in private chat rooms, they approach breach forums.
Right.
Now, breach forums is the undisputed successor to raid forums, which was taken down by global law enforcement back in 2022. Breach forums currently has roughly 300,000 registered users.
That is a massive user base.
It is the central nervous system for the English-speaking cybercrime economy. And Vect went to the administrators and effectively said, we want to make your entire user base our affiliate network.
It is a mass enrollment model that completely changes the economics of ransomware. Dataminer's analysis of the integration shows a highly gamified, corporate-style affiliate console embedded directly into the forum.
It's so weird.
It looks and functions like a legitimate SaaS dashboard.
I saw the screenshots in the report, and it's surreal. I mean, if you sign up as an affiliate, you get access to a TOX-based communication system. TOX is a peer-to-peer, end-to-end encrypted protocol, so there's no central server for law enforcement to seize. VECT also implemented a Monero-only multi-signature escrow system.
The multi-sig escrow is crucial for building trust within a criminal enterprise.
Why is that?
Well, in a traditional setup, an affiliate might deploy the ransomware, the victim pays the core group, and then the core group just vanishes without paying the affiliate their cut.
Oh, right. Thieves stealing from thieves.
Exactly. A multi-signature wallet prevents that. It requires 2 out of 3 parties, typically the affiliate, the core VECT operator, and a trusted form administrator to cryptographically sign off before the funds can be moved.
That's incredibly organized.
It mathematically guarantees that everyone gets paid, which incentivizes higher-tier hackers to join the program.
And the incentives are heavily tiered. If you are a top-performing affiliate and you bring in massive enterprise targets, perhaps leveraging the initial access that TeamPCP harvested through that LLM supply chain poisoning vect rewards you.
Yeah, you get VIP treatment.
You get a higher percentage of the ransom split, and you get access to premium, high-bandwidth cloud storage lockers to facilitate the data exfiltration. They have basically built a fully optimized corporate sales funnel for digital extortion.
You have TeamPCP functioning as the automated logistics and supply chain wing, systematically compromising CI/CD pipelines to harvest access at scale.
Right.
You have VECT providing the malware development and the cryptographically secure financial processing.
Yeah.
And you have breach forums serving as a 300,000-strong global distribution and sales force. It is the absolute corporatization of the threat landscape.
And the corporatization trend isn't just limited to VECT. The GuidePoint report we reviewed details a massive structural shift in another ecosystem entirely, a community known simply as the COM.
Ah, yes, the COM.
This ecosystem consists of groups like Scattered Spider, which you might remember from the devastating Zero-K Topless campaign in 2022 that breached thousands of organizations by targeting Twilio and Okta, along with LAPS, Geo, and ShinyHunters. According to the intelligence, these highly destructive groups publicly formalized a merger.
They announced they were operating under the unified banner of Scattered LAPACU Hunters.
It's quite a mouthful.
Concurrently, ShinyHunters released a brand new ransomware service offering dubbed Shiny SP1DAC.
Okay, the name Shiny SP1D3R sounds ridiculous, like a villain from a Saturday morning cartoon, but the operational capability is terrifying. ShinyHunters alone was responsible for a 2025 vishing campaign, voice phishing, that allegedly resulted in the exfiltration of nearly 1 billion Salesforce records.
They are incredibly capable.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I want to explore the underlying logic of this merger. Because if you look closely at the GuidePoint analysis, the actual operational tradecraft, the infrastructure they use, the targeting profiles, none of that fundamentally changed after the merger announcement.
That is the crucial insight. The technical reality is that these groups have always had incredibly fluid memberships.
Right.
The core operators, the initial access brokers, the malware developers, they routinely collaborate across different campaigns. So if the technical operations remain the same, why publicly announce a formal merger?
Exactly. Why bot?
The answer is psychological warfare. It is pure brand marketing.
It's an intimidation tactic.
Exactly. Put yourself in the shoes of an incident responder or a CEO who just discovered their network is encrypted. If you receive a ransom note from a relatively unknown group, your crisis management team might advise you to stall, to try and negotiate the price down, or to wait and see if a decryption key becomes publicly available.
Sure, you try to buy time.
But if that ransom note bears the combined logos and the established brand weight of Scattered Spider, LAPS, and ShinyHunters, the calculus changes entirely. You're facing the perceived combined wrath of 3 of the most volatile and destructive extortion groups on the planet.
Ugh, that's...
The merger is designed to induce panic, paralyze the victim's decision-making process, and force a rapid ransom payment.
I love that you brought up the fluidity of the membership, because I want to push back a little on the idea that these are highly structured, rigid cartels in the traditional sense, like a mafia family with a strict hierarchy, because the GuidePoint report also details the Hellcat hub, and it specifically profiles a threat actor operating under the alias Ray.
Oh, Ray, yeah.
The analysts explicitly note that trying to apply traditional group attribution to actors like Ray provides, quote, limited value.
That is a vital nuance. The infrastructure, The multi-fig escrow scripts, the zero-day exploit development, the cloud exfiltration lockers that requires deep technical maturity and cartel-like organization. But the labor force executing the attacks is vastly different. The COM is fundamentally a decentralized network. It is predominantly composed of English-speaking youth, often ranging from 16 to 25 years old.
They aren't sitting in some bunker in Eastern Europe. They're recruiting on gaming servers and Discord channels. It's a gig economy of highly capable, deeply chaotic teenagers.
Yeah.
They might fly the scattered LAPS Hunters flag on Monday because that brand commands the highest ransom payouts, and then swap their Discord profile picture and operate under the Hellcat banner on Thursday. The brand is a monolith, but the workforce is entirely mercenary.
And that chaotic, gig economy workforce makes defense incredibly difficult. You aren't defending against a single, predictable adversary with a standard playbook. You are defending against a swarm of 300,000 highly motivated freelancers who are constantly sharing techniques and probing your external attack surface for the slightest misconfiguration.
Which is exactly why the services provided by our sponsors www.breached.company and www.CISOmarketplace.com are not just helpful, they are literally survival requirements. When you have a massive, decentralized workforce of cybercriminals specifically incentivized to find the forgotten API key or the unpatched firewall in your infrastructure, you need an intelligence partner who maps your external vulnerabilities faster than the cartels do.
You really do.
I cannot stress enough how critical it is to utilize platforms like www.breached.company and www.cisomarketplace.com to gain that visibility before you end up on a dark web leak site.
The value of that proactive visibility becomes even clearer when we look at the operations of mid-tier ransomware groups. Because while we've been discussing these hyper-sophisticated industrialized supply chain attacks, the reality is that the cybercrime landscape is still heavily populated by operators who make astonishingly rudimentary errors.
Oh man, yeah.
The ecosystem is lethal, but it's not flawless.
This brings us to one of the most fascinating case studies in the entire intelligence stack: the profile of the gentleman ransomware operation. The dichotomy here is wild. On one hand, they were an incredibly destructive force. Proven Data's tactical analysis shows they scaled with terrifying speed.
Very fast.
In just their first 2 months of operation, they published 48 organizations to their extortion leak site. By early February 2026, the confirmed victim count exceeded 130 organizations globally.
They achieved that velocity by operating a highly aggressive plug-and-play affiliate model. The operation was architected by a Russian-speaking threat actor utilizing the alias Hasta la Muerte.
Hasta la muerte.
And Hasta la Muerte understood that to scale quickly, you have to lower the barrier to entry for your affiliates. He wasn't just providing a compiled encryption locker and wishing them luck. He provided a comprehensive end-to-end attack package.
He essentially franchised the initial access. The intelligence indicates he was heavily supplying his affiliates with compromised Fortinet devices.
Yes.
Specifically, he was weaponizing CVE 2024-55591, which is a critical vulnerability in FortiOS that allows an unauthenticated attacker to execute arbitrary code. So he's handing his affiliates the keys to the front door of hundreds of enterprise networks.
And once the affiliates were inside, he provided custom tooling to ensure the ransomware could execute without being blocked. He developed specific killers, utilities designed to systematically blind or disable antivirus and endpoint detection and response platforms.
But despite building this highly lethal, incredibly successful infrastructure, Hasta la Muerte committed an operational security failure that is almost comical.
It's amazing.
It's a failure rooted entirely in ego. The forensic findings published jointly by Cybereason and Group IB are a phenomenal testament to the value of deep-dive threat intelligence. Analysts were monitoring communications on a prominent dark web platform known as the Rehub Forum.
On this forum, Hasta la Muerte decides to engage in a technical debate. He wants to prove his coding prowess to the community.
Of course he does.
He publishes a detailed post explaining a novel technique for bypassing anti-ransomware protections, specifically focusing on how to evade canary files.
Okay, let's break down the mechanism of a canary file for a second, because it's crucial to understanding the blunder. EDR software uses canary files as tripwires.
Right.
They place hidden documents, often filled with highly entropic random data, deep inside the directories of a hard drive. A normal user will never interact with these files, but when ransomware executes, it blindly crawls the file system, encrypting everything it touches.
It just acts like a lawnmower.
Exactly. The moment the ransomware alters the canary file, the EDR's kernel driver detects the modification, immediately flags the process as malicious, and kills the encryption thread. It halts the attack in its tracks.
It's an incredibly effective behavioral detection mechanism. In his forum post, Hasela Muerte details exactly how his malware parses the EDR's exclusion manifests to identify the exact paths of these canary files, allowing his encryption routine to actively skip them.
Brilliant, right.
His malware effectively steps over the tripwires. But to demonstrate his point, he includes a very specific string of text in his public post.
The string was exclamation mark, angle brackets, ransom protection, don't delete.
Yeah.
He posted this publicly under his forum alias to show off his evasion logic. Now, fast forward a few weeks. Analysts at Cybereason capture a live sample of the Gentleman ransomware, a Windows executable caught in the wild during an incident response engagement.
And they tear it apart.
They throw the binary into a disassembler like IDEA Pro or Ghidra to reverse engineer the code. And what do they find hard-coded directly into the malware source code?
They extracted that exact string, exclamation mark, angle brackets, ransom protection, don't delete.
It's just too good.
It was an undeniable cryptographic fingerprint tying the compiled malware directly back to his public persona on the Rehub forum. He essentially autographed the murder weapon. The group IB Intelligence also noted that this wasn't an isolated incident of bad OPSEC. Other prominent forum users, including an actor named Devman, were actively posting warnings, telling affiliates that joining the Gentleman's Partnership Program was a massive liability because the administrator's operational security was just so sloppy.
You build an extortion empire terrorizing 130 companies, causing tens of millions of dollars in economic damage, and you compromise your entire operation because you couldn't resist bragging to a bunch of teenagers on a message board? It's astonishing.
While the hubris is fascinating from a psychological standpoint, the underlying reality for network defenders remains grim. Even a threat actor with terrible operational security can cause catastrophic damage if they possess a functional exploit for a perimeter firewall and a working encryption locker.
Yeah, that's true.
The barrier to entry for causing systemic economic disruption has plummeted. You don't need to be a nation-state to cripple a hospital. You just need to buy the right package from someone like Hasela Muerte.
And that is a really sobering transition point, because while the financial damage of ransomware is immense, the motivation is ultimately rational, right? It's about extracting capital. But when we pivot to look at the geopolitical bleed over in early 2026, the motivation shifts from financial extortion to pure ideological destruction.
It's a completely different game.
We are looking at threat actors whose sole objective is to inflict maximum physical and economic pain.
The intelligence surrounding the geopolitical cyber campaigns, particularly those originating from the Middle East, demonstrates a terrifying evolution in destructive capabilities. We have to analyze the March 2026 attack on Stryker, which was detailed extensively in a Hawkeye threat advisory.
Stryker is a colossal entity. They are a Fortune 200 medical technology giant based in Michigan, pulling in over $25 billion in annual revenue. They manufacture critical surgical equipment, joint replacements, neurosurgical devices, and they were hit by an attack that wasn't designed to extort them. It was designed to erase them.
It is vital to clearly define the taxonomy of the attack. This was not ransomware.
Not ransomware.
No. Ransomware relies on asymmetric cryptography to lock your data, with the implicit promise that if you pay the ransom, the attacker provides the private key to unlock it. The attack against Stryker was a wiper attack.
A wiper?
The malware deployed was designed to permanently and irreversibly overwrite the master boot records and the file systems of the target devices. There is no decryption key. The objective is total operational sabotage.
The attack was claimed by a group operating under the name 313 Team, who are also tracked by intelligence agencies as Islamic Cyber Resistance, or Handala.
Yeah.
They have well-documented deep ties to the MOIS, Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. And the technical mechanism they used to deploy this wiper is what makes this incident so paradigm-shifting.
Yes.
They didn't just write a self-propagating worm and release it into the network to spread organically. They targeted the administrative nervous system of the enterprise.
They weaponized Microsoft Intune.
Microsoft Intune.
Intune is a cloud-based unified endpoint management service. Enterprises deploy Intune to manage the life cycles of laptops, smartphones, and tablets across a global workforce.
It's what the IT department uses to manage everything.
Exactly. It allows the IT department to push software updates, enforce conditional access policies, and, crucially, to issue a remote wipe command if a device is reported lost or stolen to protect corporate data.
So the 313 team manages to breach the environment, escalate privileges, and gain administrative control over the Intune tenant. They essentially gained control of the master switchboard. And at 3:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, they didn't just push a malicious update. They abused the Graph API that underpins Intune to issue a simultaneous remote wipe command to the entire fleet.
The telemetry indicates that over 200,000 devices received the wipe command.
200,000 devices.
Laptops, mobile devices, corporate servers. The scale of the destruction was instantaneous. Concurrently, they defaced the Microsoft Entra, formerly Azure AD login portals, replacing the corporate branding with their own ideological messaging.
The physical and economic fallout was staggering. I mean, in Cork, Ireland, which houses Stryker's largest manufacturing and engineering hub outside the United States, the localized IT infrastructure completely collapsed. They had to send 5,500 employees home because the machines literally wouldn't boot.
You can't work if the computer won't turn on.
Exactly. Operations were halted across facilities in 79 different countries. If you called the main U.S. headquarters, the voicemail had been changed to a generic message stating they were experiencing a building emergency. Wall Street reacted immediately, dropping the stock by 4% in a single day.
Wow.
But the most terrifying aspect, as reported by Krebs on Security, was the downstream impact on the healthcare supply chain. U.S. hospitals reported critical delays in ordering surgical supplies. The logistics network was severed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this incident bridges the theoretical gap between a cyber attack and a kinetic event.
Right.
A surgical procedure in a hospital can be delayed or canceled with potentially life-altering consequences for the patient, not because of a physical blockade of a shipping port, but because a state-sponsored actor pushed a line of code through a mobile device management portal. We are witnessing the weaponization of the enterprise administration layer.
And this attack on Stryker wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a broader, highly coordinated geopolitical campaign. The Unit 42 intelligence report contextualizes this by highlighting the blend of digital and physical threats. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, issued public statements declaring a 1-kilometer danger zone around the physical facilities of U.S. technology firms operating in the Middle East.
That physical threat creates an immediate digital vulnerability.
How so?
Well, when a nation-state threatens kinetic violence against an office building, the corporation responds by mandating that all personnel in that region immediately shift to remote work.
Oh, of course. Get everyone out of the building.
Right. This sudden, unmapped expansion of the remote workforce drastically alters the external attack surface. It forces employees to connect via home routers, personal ISPs, and potentially unsecured Wi-Fi networks, which creates massive new entry points for threat actors. The physical threat dictates the digital posture, and the attackers are positioned to exploit the resulting chaos.
The scope of the exploitation is massive. We saw advanced persistent threat groups like CyberAve3ners and Pioneer Kitten, who are also tracked under the designation Foxkitten, shifting their targeting profiles from standard IT networks to operational technology.
Rookie, yeah.
They began aggressively scanning for vulnerabilities in programmable logic controllers, PLCs, and SCADA devices. These are the specialized computer systems that control the physical world. They open and close valves in water treatment plants. They regulate voltage and power grids. They control the robotic arms on a manufacturing floor.
The real-world stuff.
Exactly. Specifically, the intelligence notes they were targeting vulnerabilities in Rockwell Automation's FactoryTalk software, which is deeply embedded in critical infrastructure globally.
Bridging the air gap between the IT network where the emails and spreadsheets live and the OT network where the physical machinery is controlled is the ultimate goal of destructive state-sponsored actors. Once you compromise the FactoryTalk infrastructure, you have the capability to cause catastrophic physical damage. And alongside these hyper-sophisticated nation-state operations against critical infrastructure, the intelligence also details a massive surge in low-level opportunistic fraud, leveraging the exact same geopolitical crisis.
Scammers taking advantage.
Attackers registered thousands of conflict-themed scam domains using typo squatting and punny-code techniques. We saw domains like ironforward.org popping up. To the casual observer, it looks like a legitimate NGO or humanitarian aid site, complete with stolen logos and impassioned pleas for help. But the donate button just routes cryptocurrency directly into the wallets of scammers in Eastern Europe.
That's awful.
We also saw a massive spike in fake Emirates Post phishing sites, perfectly timed to exploit the anxiety of people expecting critical packages in a disrupted region, designed purely to harvest credit card credentials. It demonstrates the multi-tiered nature of modern cyber conflict. You have the apex predators, the state-sponsored intelligence agencies executing complex supply chain wipers to cripple defense and medical contractors. And swimming in their wake are thousands of bottom feeders, utilizing automated infrastructure to extract micropayments from terrified civilians. The ecosystem exploits vulnerability at every single level.
Now, you might be listening to this analyzing the sheer scale of a 200,000 device Intune wipe or a state-sponsored attack on Rockwell Automation PLCs and thinking, this is terrifying, but I don't manage the SCADA network for a power grid. I run a mid-size retail business. I'm not a target for Iranian state-sponsored hackers.
And that assumption is exactly what leads to catastrophic failure.
Exactly, because you don't have to be the primary target to be utterly destroyed in the crossfire.
This introduces the concept of concentrated third-party risk. As enterprise networks have become harder to breach directly, threat actors have logically shifted their focus to the software supply chain and the service providers that those enterprises rely upon.
Let's look at the Hasbro incident from late March 2026. Hasbro is a massive consumer brand. They own Play-Doh, Transformers, Magic, The Gathering. They detected unauthorized access deep within their internal systems. And to their credit, their incident response team executed the playbook perfectly. They immediately and proactively severed network connections to contain the lateral movement of the threat actor.
But containment in a hyper-connected enterprise environment comes with severe operational costs. By proactively shutting down those internal network segments, they effectively paralyze their own global manufacturing, order processing, and shipping logistics.
It's a self-inflicted wound to stop a bigger one.
Right. They had to fall back on incredibly inefficient interim workarounds, likely manual processing and spreadsheets, just to keep physical products moving out of the warehouses.
But the fascinating technical caveat to the Hasbro breach is how it highlighted modern network compartmentalization. While their legacy ERP systems and on-premise manufacturing networks were completely incapacitated, their direct-to-consumer digital storefronts, massive revenue engines like D&D Beyond and the Magic, the Gathering Arena online game were completely unaffected. They operated flawlessly throughout the entire incident.
That disparity perfectly illustrates the complexity of modern architecture. A legacy manufacturing network is often built on decades-old Active Directory trusts, where a single compromised domain controller can bring down facilities across the globe.
Yeah.
Conversely, a platform like D&D Beyond is likely a cloud-native application, hosted in a highly segmented AWS environment, utilizing containerized microservices and zero-trust authentication protocols. It shows that an organization's security posture is not monolithic. You'd have world-class resilience in one division and catastrophic fragility in another.
And that fragility is often outsourced. We saw this clearly with the breaches at Hims and Hers, the major telehealth provider, and Rockstar Games, one of the biggest video game publishers on the planet. Both of these massive corporations suffered significant data breaches, and in both cases, their own internal network perimeters were never breached. The failure occurred entirely within their trusted vendor ecosystem.
Hims and Hers had to issue notifications that customer names and contact information were compromised. Crucially, they noted that highly regulated medical records were not exposed.
Which is good.
Yes. The breach occurred because a third-party customer service platform they utilized, likely a SaaS provider similar to Zendesk or Salesforce, was compromised by threat actors. Rockstar Games faced a similar scenario. The ShinyHunters group managed to exfiltrate massive amounts of internal analytics data. How? By breaching Anodot, a third-party cloud analytics tool.
And the Anodot breach is particularly interesting because it highlights the vulnerability of the modern data lake architecture. Anodot had administrative access tokens that allowed them to query Rockstar's Snowflake databases.
The Snowflake architecture relies heavily on a shared responsibility model. Snowflake provides the secure infrastructure, but the customer is responsible for managing access control.
Right.
Threat actors like ShinyHunters increasingly utilize sophisticated info stealers malware strains like Luma or Redline that infect the personal laptops of developers or vendor employees. These info stealers scrape the browser cookies and extract valid session tokens.
And if you have a valid session token, you don't need a password. You don't even need to bypass multi-factor authentication because the token proves you've already completed the MFA challenge.
Exactly.
You just inject the cookie into your browser and you are instantly authenticated as the administrator. It is a terrifying bypass of traditional identity controls.
Exactly. When you grant a third-party analytics vendor read access to your data lake, you are implicitly accepting the risk of their entire security apparatus. If their employee downloads a pirated video game on their home laptop and gets infected with an info stealer, your corporate analytics data ends up on a dark web forum. The perimeter is entirely porous.
But the most chilling example of this third-party vulnerability impacting the end consumer, the absolute nightmare scenario for social engineering, is the Booking.com anecdote detailed in the Malwarebytes report.
The Booking.com scenario represents the pinnacle of contextual exploitation. Booking.com notified customers that unauthorized third parties had accessed the reservation systems of individual partner hotels.
Not Booking.com itself, but the partners.
Right. The threat actors didn't manage to steal credit card numbers directly from Booking.com's encrypted vaults. Instead, they stole the metadata of the reservations: names, phone numbers, email addresses, check-in dates, and the specific room types booked.
And what do you do with reservation metadata? Malwarebytes shared the story of Robert Woodford, a traveler who booked a hotel in Verona, Italy. The scammers utilized the stolen reservation data to craft an incredibly precise spear phishing attack. But they didn't send him a spoofed email from a lookalike domain. They actually hijacked the hotel's authentication tokens or compromised an API key and used it to send Robert a message inside the official Booking.com mobile application.
They utilized the platform's native, trusted message bus. They flawlessly impersonated the hotel concierge in Verona. They referenced Robert's exact travel dates, the specific suite he had booked, and informed him that due to a system error, he needed to re-verify his payment details via a link provided in the chat.
Because the message arrived as a push notification from the official Booking.com app on his phone, and because it contained perfectly accurate, non-public context about his upcoming trip, all of his standard defensive instincts were bypassed.
Totally bypassed.
We train consumers to look for typos in the URL or suspicious sender addresses. But how do you train a consumer to identify a scam when the communication originates from the authenticated internal system of the vendor they trust? The breach of trust is absolute.
It is the perfect scam because it weaponizes legitimacy. When the context is flawless, human verification protocols fail entirely. It underscores why securing the API layer and implementing strict anomaly detection within application messaging systems is just as critical as securing the database itself.
And managing all of these complex cascading threats, from API abuse to state-sponsored wipers, is happening against a backdrop of significant shifting in the regulatory and defense landscape. It is worth noting the context provided by a recent cybersecurity dive report regarding the infrastructure of the U.S. cyber defense apparatus. According to the report, CISO, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is the central coordinating body for national cyber defense, lost nearly all of its top leadership officials in May 2025 amidst a broader government downsizing initiative.
Regardless of the political mechanics driving those changes, the operational reality for the private sector is stark.
Very stark.
The intelligence demonstrates an unprecedented escalation in the sophistication of industrialized supply chain attacks and geopolitical conflict. When the Central National Agency tasked with public-private threat intelligence sharing undergoes massive leadership turnover and structural instability, the burden of defense shifts heavily and inevitably onto the shoulders of private corporations and individual network defenders.
You are entirely on your own, which is exactly why leveraging platforms like www.breach.company and www.CISOmarketplace.com isn't a luxury. It's a strategic imperative. If the centralized national threat feeds are disrupted, you have to generate your own intelligence. You have to know what the cartels are discussing on the Rehab forum before they weaponize it against your infrastructure.
Proactive intelligence is the only viable defense when the perimeter has dissolved.
But with supply chains poisoned at the .pth file level, 300,000 member cartels merging into supergroups, state actors dropping wipers from Intune, and third-party vendors leaking our vacation itineraries to scammers inside official apps. Well, the listener has to be wondering, is anyone fighting back? Are we just completely at the mercy of this industrialized ecosystem?
The intelligence indicates that the ecosystem is highly resilient, but law enforcement is adapting their methodologies. We are seeing significant coordinated pushback that moves beyond simply arresting individuals.
Let's examine Operation Power Off. This was a massive, globally coordinated action led by Europol involving law enforcement agencies from 21 different countries. Their primary target was the infrastructure enabling DDoS for hire services.
Booter services.
Yeah, booter services.
Yeah.
These platforms allow literally anyone with a few dollars in cryptocurrency to launch a distributed denial-of-service attack against a website, a competitor, or an enterprise network.
The technical execution of the takedown was comprehensive. Europol and their partners executed DNS redirection and seized control of the authoritative name servers for 53 prominent booter domains, including massive platforms like vaxdresser.net.
Wow.
But seizing the domains, replacing the website with a law enforcement seizure banner, was only the tactical phase of the operation. The strategic victory was seizing the underlying databases.
By taking control of the back-end infrastructure, they uncovered the logs, they extracted the transaction hashes, the target IP addresses, and the connection logs for over 3 million criminal user accounts.
3 million accounts. That number quantifies the staggering scale of low-level cybercrime participation. But what is truly innovative about Operation Power Off is how law enforcement approached the prevention phase.
Yeah, this is so cool.
They recognize that playing whack-a-mole with domains is ultimately a losing battle. You have to disrupt the recruitment pipeline.
They intercepted the cyber kill chain at the reconnaissance phase. The reports detail how law enforcement agencies began actively running targeted Google ads. When young individuals searched for terms like how to DDoS a server or best booter service, they weren't directed to criminal forums.
Right.
They were served targeted ads from law enforcement, directing them to educational landing pages that explicitly warned them about the severe legal consequences of deploying these tools.
It is a brilliant application of search engine marketing for deterrence. Furthermore, they utilize the transaction data they seize to send warning messages directly onto the blockchains that the criminals were using to process payments.
That's amazing.
They were embedding law enforcement warnings directly into the cryptographic ledger of the threat actors' wallets.
Sliding into a hacker's crypto wallet with a Europol warning label is an incredible power move, and Power Off wasn't an isolated raid. The intelligence stack also details Interpol's Operation Synergy at the Third, which spanned multiple continents and resulted in 94 high-value arrests. Concurrently, Europol announced the systemic takedown of 373,000 dark websites.
That's a huge number.
It is. But the most fascinating detail about those 373,000 sites is the underlying economics of the dark web. The vast majority of those hidden services were entirely fraudulent.
They were honeypots and scams built by criminals to steal from other criminals.
Scammers, scamming scammers.
Yeah, they advertised access to horrific contraband like child exploitation material or premium cybercrime as a service tools like high-limited credit card dumps. But they never delivered the data. They simply absorbed the Bitcoin and vanished. The dark web is heavily populated by scammers scamming the scammers.
There is zero honor among thieves. But I have to ask a highly pointed question here. We discussed earlier how Breach Forums has 300,000 active, highly capable members. We've seen the scale of the scattered ShinyHunters merger. Does playing whack-a-mole with 53 booter domains or seizing a bunch of fake dark websites actually move the needle against a decentralized, industrialized cartel ecosystem?
It is the fundamental question of cyber deterrence. The answer lies not in the technical disruption, but in the psychological impact of exposing those 3 million accounts. Yes, a threat actor can spin up a new domain and deploy a new booter service in a matter of hours.
Yeah, that part is easy.
The technical infrastructure is highly reproducible, but trust is not reproducible.
You're saying it shatters the illusion of anonymity.
Precisely. The entire low-level cybercrime economy relies on a psychological safety blanket. A 19-year-old deploying DDoS attack from their bedroom fundamentally believes that the Tor network and the cryptocurrency mixer provide absolute anonymity. When Europol seizes the database and that 19-year-old realizes that international law enforcement possesses their account details, their real IP address, and their complete payment history, it introduces a profound, paralyzing, chilling effect. Law enforcement is evolving from merely attacking the servers to actively undermining the perceived safety and trust that underpins the entire cybercrime ecosystem.
Okay, we have covered an absolutely staggering amount of ground today. We have traced the microscopic poisoning of a python.pth file deep inside the LightLM library, exposing how a single unmanaged credential can compromise 95 million downloads. We've mapped out the boardroom-style marketing strategies of cartel mergers like scattered LAPS hunters and Vect. We've explored the devastating physical realities of state-sponsored wipers deployed through Microsoft Intune, and we've seen how Europol is utilizing Google Ads to wage psychological warfare against 3 million cybercriminals.
The complexity of the threat landscape is vast, but the through line connecting all of this intelligence is absolute. The perimeter has dissolved.
Exactly. The critical takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive right now, is that security is no longer just about the firewalls you build around your own data center. It is entirely about the third-party vendors you trust, the open-source code your developers integrate without auditing, and the vast, invisible ecosystem of dependencies that your business relies upon. The water supply is under active, industrialized attack, And you have to aggressively filter every single drop before you let it into your fortress.
And this raises an important question, something we really need to critically examine as we look toward the future of enterprise architecture. We analyzed how TeamPCP effortlessly poisoned Litel LM, a foundational proxy library serving as the connective tissue for artificial intelligence APIs.
Right.
If the future of global enterprise technology relies entirely on integrating these AI proxies, and we are rushing headlong to embed LLMs into every single facet of our business operations, are we building the future of the economy on an inherently compromised foundation?
Oh, wow.
If threat actors are already deeply embedded in the supply chain, how can we possibly trust the outputs of the AI systems when we can't even audit the open source building blocks they are constructed upon?
That is a terrifying, essential, and profound thought to leave on. If we cannot trust the .pth files initializing our infrastructure, the integrity of the entire AI revolution is in question. Thank you for expertly guiding us through this incredibly dense and critical intelligence. And a final, highly enthusiastic thank you to our sponsors, www.breached.company and www.cisomarketplace.com. If you want to understand your external attack surface, and if you want to identify the vulnerabilities in your supply chain before a 300,000 member cartel does, you absolutely need to leverage their platforms. Remember, the traditional X-ray machine for network defense is broken, and the waters of the supply chain are murky, but you do not have to navigate this threat landscape alone. Stay curious, stay secure, and keep exploring.